Hello, welcome to the Manasplained podcast. I'm Connor. Today I'll be talking about the deck I built for Sivitri Scarzam. So Sivitri is a 6/4 for 7 mana, which as a vanilla creature, those are already terrible stats, so there's not much you can do with this creature. Also, just a human, no other types, and I didn't really feel like making Dimir humans, so we're going Voltron for this deck. Now, there are a lot of better Voltron commanders, even in Dimir. The whole thing of being a vanilla creature is really bad, and 7 mana is a lot of mana. But 6/4 we can work with, and that is getting her to 7 power or 8 power, and then getting her double strike, and then being able to kill 2 hits, 1 hit. It basically is trying to string enough damage boosts and a double strike, or enough damage boosts together to get the 2-shot or the 3-shot or the 1-shot kill. Because if we boost Sivitri to 7 power, that's 3 shots. If we give it double strike, that goes to 12 damage, so that's a 2-shot, and then we can get to 11 power plus double strike, that's the 1-shot. And it's trying to string together some combination of that is kind of difficult. It's a lot easier when you have red, because red has the effects that let you deal double damage, which stack with double strike and all that. But we're in Dimir, which means we have access to great evasion. We have a lot of cards that just say this creature can't be blocked, so it's great for that part of the Voltron strategy. And also on combat damage drawing cards, blue is also very good at that as well. And so I really like the eventual card package I was able to sling together for this commander, but there are so many better Dimir commanders for Voltron. If you're going to do this kind of strategy, you're better off picking somebody else. But I hope you liked the video, and I hope if you watch the video, you can see how you might take a Dimir Voltron deck if you're going to do this for yourself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps with the algorithm, gets more people to see these videos, and I love talking with you guys down in the comments. That's the best part of making all these videos, and especially when I get card recommendations about cards that I've never even heard of from you guys down there, and talking about other decks you've built. It's the best part of all this, so thank you so much. So for the deck breakdown, we have 17 evasion cards, 18 pump cards, and 10 protection cards. We're not leaning into any other gimmicky stuff or any other kind of strategy here. We're just giving her evasion, pumping her up, and protecting her. That's all we're trying to do. I tried to make this deck a lot more focused, not really going down other side paths. Just really narrowed in on getting her to 7 power or double strike, and then going for the kill. And I think I managed to do that quite well. For the rest of the deck, 10 draw, 17 ramp, 5 removal, 1 board wipe, and 38 lands. The draw is a little bit lower, but a lot of it's repeatable on damage draw cards, so that's good. And then the 17 ramp, our commander costs 7. We have artifacts that we need to equip, and then we have auras we need to play, so the amount of ramp is really necessary to get our commander out in a timely fashion, and then slap some equipment onto her or an aura onto her. That's going to be helpful. And then also to hold that mana for protection. This deck is pretty mana hungry, so all that ramp definitely is necessary. And because of all these other categories really leaning in on what we're trying to do here, we weren't able to run much removal, and we're going for player removal anyways. So we're just running some removal to get rid of key pieces that might be harmful, so that we can go in for the actual lethal and kill the player, so we don't need to remove any of their stuff anymore. The 1 board wipe won't touch our commander or any of our strategy that's going on, so I'm really happy about that. And then 38 lands, the lands are higher than 36, which is what I'm normally running. That's because our commander costs 7, and we need to hit our land drops. The happiest part about this deck for me is the 16 crossover cards. One of them's even a crossover 3 card, fits in 3 categories, which is honestly pretty wild. I think this is great. At 16 cards, the value per draw is amazing. It's a sixth of the deck, basically, that has more than 1 slot it fills, which is incredible. I'm really happy with this. I think it makes the deck run a lot smoother when you can have a card that's evasion and pump, or it's card draw and evasion. Like the cards that fill multiple categories like that really help in a strategy like this, when you're really hurting for any kind of meaningful board presence. When people are trying to remove your commander, you can have protection and pump on one card. It really helps a lot. The first category of the deck is evasion. It's basically the theme. Because we're in blue and black, we have access to amazing evasion, both in the aura and equipment categories. I think it's great. I think we're going to be able to hit people quite often, but because we're going to be going for lethal commander damage, people are going to be trying to hit our commanders, which is why the protection will be important later, and I'll get to that later. But yeah, the evasion is quite good in this deck, and I'm very happy with it. Starting off the evasion category, we have Sword Coast Sailor. Basically what it says is if our commander attacks the opponent with the most life, it's unblockable, which is absolutely phenomenal. That's so good. It makes easy attacks in. It's not an aura or an equipment, so it can't fall off. For 2 mana, it's just an enchantment you'll slap down. It does exactly what we need it to do, and the fact that it isn't an aura or equipment makes it way less fragile. I really love that part about it. And at 2 mana, this card is so efficient for what you're trying to do. I absolutely love it. Next up, we got Sonic Screwdriver. It is a ramp spell that'll act as evasion later when we need it. It's absolutely amazing. And it can also untap another artifact. So say we have an artifact like a Soul Ring that can tap for additional mana, it can ramp that way. Or if we have something that can tap for 3 mana, you can untap it and tap for more mana. It's really useful that way. And yeah, the Scry one, you're probably never going to use that, but the untapped target artifact or target creature can't be blocked this turn are just exactly what we're looking for, in addition to it tapping for 1 mana of any color. And then Prowler's Helm and Trailblazer's Boots, just phenomenal evasion. Most people aren't playing walls, so Prowler's Helm can't be blocked except by walls, so that's going to come up almost never. And then Trailblazer's Boots, non-basic land walk. Even monocolored decks are running non-basics just because the amount of utility you can get outside of basics is so important. So yeah, Trailblazer's Boots is going to be unblockable on everybody probably all of the time. Next up are the evasion auras. These are a little bit worse than the cards I just shown because if our commander dies, these go to the graveyard and then they're gone. So that's a little unfortunate. But they're still quite strong. Aqueous Form at 1 mana, enchanted creature can't be blocked, and when it attacks, you scry 1. At 1 mana, it's one of the strongest versions of this in the deck. It's super easy to slam out, and the scry 1 is just great incidental value. And then Cloak of Mists for 1 and a blue, enchanted creature's unblockable, another great effect. It's a little bit worse than Aqueous Form because of the 1 additional mana and losing the scry 1, but still great. And then Invisibility is the worst of the 3 here, costing 2 blue mana, so it's a little harder to cast. And then enchanted creature can't be blocked except by walls. Again, it's the same effect as Prowler's Helm, and that's going to be online all the time. Next up are the invasive equipment that give protection. These are super helpful. Silver Shroud costume, when it enters equipped to a creature, and that creature gets Shroud until the end of turn. So if someone's playing removal on our commander, we can throw this down, and it has flash, so we can do it in someone else's turn. Makes great protection, and then it's also evasion. Like I said, filling 2 slots at once, so useful. And then Winged Boots. Ward 4 and equip creature has flying. So flying is very good evasion. Most decks can't deal with flying. They usually don't even have incidental little flying blockers. Most decks just can't deal with flying altogether, and it's hilarious how often that comes up. And the Ward 4 as well. So if someone casts a spell on targeting our commander, they'll have to spend 4 additional mana in order for it to be not be countered, which is essentially hexproof. There are some spells that say this spell can't be countered, and that gets around ward, but holy crap, Ward 4 is basically hexproof. And for 2 mana and equip 1, flying and hexproof, yeah, that's fantastic. These are the draw effects that are also evasion. So Key to the City, you can tap and discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn, but when it becomes untapped, you can pay 2 mana, and if you do, you draw a card. So you're discarding a card to give your commander unblockable, and then later on you can pay 2 mana and untap when you untap it to draw a card. So it's card filtering. It's a little slow, but it is good unblockable. That is not an aura or equipment, so we don't have to pay to equip it onto a creature, or if our commander dies, go to the graveyard. We don't have to worry about that. It just sticks on the board, and if we want to, we can make our opponent's creatures unblockable. If there's someone we're having trouble attacking in on and we need them out of the game, we could maybe politic someone else to attack with a creature, give them unblockable, get them in to kill somebody. Yeah, the politics with Key to the City is also quite fun. And then Security Bypass, whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it connives. So it's kind of pump, but not really. I didn't put it in the pump category because it's very situational. Because you need to discard a non-land card and it needs to hit first. So it's not really what you're looking for in a pump spell. But the fact that if it's attacking alone, can't be blocked, so that's perfect evasion. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, connive, that is a form of card draw. It's more card selection instead of card draw. But it's looting. You draw a card, then discard a card. So it's better than Key to the City because we get to see what we drew and if we even want to keep it. And then finally, Sleeper's Lobe. Enchanted creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and black creatures. So that will come up pretty often, unfortunately. A lot of people just have incidental black creatures out, or incidental colorless creatures more likely, and so they can be blocked. But when our creature deals combat damage to an opponent, we can draw a card. So Sleeper's Robe is phenomenal for that card draw, and there will be one player at the table that won't have any artifact creatures or black creatures out most of the time, and so Sleeper's Robe is going to come in clutch there. The last couple cards for this category, these are all Pump and Evasion. They're the best cards in the deck because they both help our commander get lethal faster and also let our commander get in on damage. So Aether Tunnel, Infiltrator's Mage Mark, and Tricks of the Trade, all just auras that can give the creature a boost and then they can't be blocked. Infiltrator's Mage Mark can't be blocked up a creature with Defender, so there is that, but again, Defender does not come up very often. It's like walls with Prowler's Helm. It's almost never going to come up. And then finally, Demonic Embrace and Dragon's Shadow. These are recursive auras. So Demonic Embrace, you can discard a card, pay 3 life, and then cast it from your graveyard, which is great. If our commander dies, we can get Demonic Embrace back out and keep swinging. And it gives +3/+1, so it gets our commander to 9. So we just need to get a little bit more. We can get to 11 for that 2-shot. And then if we can get Double Strike on top of that, it's 1-shot. Yeah, Demonic Embrace really helps here. And again, flying, not everyone's going to have flying blockers at the table, so it's going to be easy to get in with that. And then finally, Dragon's Shadow. So Dragon's Shadow gives +1/+0 and Fear can't be blocked except by black creatures or artifact creatures. And like I said, with Sleeper's Robe, there's going to be someone at the table that you're going to be able to swing in with this. But more importantly, Dragon's Shadow, when you cast your commander, since your commander costs more than 6 mana, you can pull Dragon's Shadow out of the graveyard and back onto the commander. And because of this, it is multiple use aura, kind of like an equipment almost that way. And it costs 0 when you do that. When you cast your commander, it gets pulled out of the graveyard for free onto our commander. That is just insane value. That's going to help us so much over the course of a game. So when you're talking about commander damage and commander lethal, 6 power is kind of one of those threshold numbers where with 4 hits, you're doing lethal, and that's great. But if you get Double Strike, it's 2 hits and it's lethal. And if you can get +1 up to 7, it's 3 hits and it's lethal. So 6 is at this weird boundary case where 4 hits and it's lethal is not a great spot, but a little bit of an extra nudge, and suddenly it's 2 shots, 3 shots, maybe even 1 shot. And so the pump cards are kind of helping us get there, either getting us to 7 power, getting the Double Strike, getting us to 11 so we can get the 2-shot, or Double Strike plus the 11 for the 1-shot. It's kind of this combination of all these effects that can really get commander damage to be a lot more dangerous, because if it's 3 shots, you're dead with commander damage. Even then, people see that coming from a mile away, and they can prepare themselves for that. So we need our pump to be a little bit stronger than that, even though sometimes the 1 power is all you need, and in a lot of cases, since it's also attached to an evasive piece, it's worth keeping. So to start off the category, I've talked about a lot already, but Double Strike. Fire Shrieker and Brass Knuckles, just easy Double Strike. Brass Knuckles is very cool because when it enters, it makes a copy of itself, and if the attached creature or the equipped creature has 2 or more equipment on it, it gets Double Strike. So we only need to equip one of the Brass Knuckles if we have another equipment out, and then boom, Double Strike, easy 2-shot kill there. But with Inquisitor's Flail, if equipped creature would deal combat damage, it deals double that damage instead. So Inquisitor's Flail plus Double Strike is the 1-shot with our commander. It's really interesting how like you can still find these red-like effects in colorless. It's just a little bit, it's honestly a little bit easier to do. Oftentimes the red damage doubler effects are like 5 mana for an enchantment. But this is a 2 mana equipment that equip 2. And if another creature would deal combat damage to equipped creature, it deals double the damage instead. That's never going to come up because, like I said, we're looking to make our creature evasive. And so the taking combat damage is never going to happen. If it does happen, we are definitely doing something wrong. After that, we got the big pump cards. So Blackblade Reforge is +1/+1 for each land we control. We only need to have 5 lands out. And then this is 11 damage, which is the 2-shot. And with our commander costing so much and having a lot of land ramp in the deck, that is going to be quite easy to get to. Cranial Plating, and Nettle Cyst both give +1/+1 in multiple different ways. So Cranial Plating is +1/+1 for each artifact you control, and Nettle Cyst is +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. And so this is with our auras and all of our equipment out. Both of these will be able to get our commander to 11 quite easily for that 2-shot. And then Hero's Blade is 2 mana, when it has +3/+2, and when a legendary creature enters, you can equip Hero's Blade to it, which is awesome for 2 mana. Just getting our commander up to 9 is insanely useful, and it combos really well with any of our other two bumps or or 3 bumps that can get it up to 11 or higher power. Hero's Blade at 2 mana is just so efficient. These two didn't really fit in any other category in the pump section. Heraldic Banner is ramp and gives our commander +0/+1. That's just a great little 2-for-1 there. It's super useful having that in the deck. And then Curious Obsession gives us commander +1/+1, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So it's pump and card draw. We do have to be careful with Curious Obsession, because if we don't attack with our creature, we'll have to sacrifice Curious Obsession. So that kind of sucks. But it's still worth having in there. It's going to draw some cards, going to give us a little boost of power. A Curious Obsession, great card. Next up, you already saw them, all of the pump cards that are also Evasion. All these cards are great and doing double duty in this deck. Again, these are the best 5 cards in the deck. And up last are the protection pieces that are also pump spells. The best one here is either Champion's Helm or Combat Research. So Champion's Helm is +2/+2 and hexproof. 3 mana to play, but 1 to equip. It's super cheap to equip. And the hexproof, I mean, it's such good protection for our commander. And the +2/+2 gets us to 8, which just gets us that much closer to the 11 we need. And then Combat Research is card draw, because on combat damage, we draw a card. It's +1/+1, and it's ward 1. So it's all 3. Combat Research fitting into 3 categories there, being pump, card draw, and protection, is phenomenal. And then the other 2 here, Armor of Shadows, +1/+1 indestructible until the end of turn, is great. It can, for 1 mana, protect our commander from some kind of board wipe that destroys everything, is super useful. And then Shore Up gives our commander +1/+1 and hexproof until the end of turn and untaps it. So if you want a surprise blocker, which I don't know why you would, but you can, it's hilarious. But more importantly, it's the hexproof, so if someone has targeted removal, we can Shore Up to stop our commander from dying. So in Voltron strategies, one of the most important card categories is protection, because if people are going to be noticing in our command zone that, hey, there's a creature with a lot of power and no other abilities, they're probably going to be attacking us with it. They have time to prepare themselves from whatever you're going to throw at them. And so you need to be able to protect yourself from whatever they're going to throw at you. And so having enough protection pieces to really hold your own and to be able to hold up defenses even when you're swinging in for damage and equipping stuff and auras and all that is very important. So starting off the protection category, Teferi's Veil. It's kind of insane. 2 mana and enchantment. Whenever any creature you control attacks, it phases out at the end of combat. I don't know why I've never seen this card before. For aggro decks, this seems amazing. It protects your board from sweepers. Like, that's great. What? I don't understand why I've never seen this card before. Like, seriously, this card seems insane. It seems ridiculous to me. Like, you have for token decks especially, because you have a token army out, you swing in with them, you connect with a bunch of them, and then you can just phase them out. And then if someone wants a board wipe on their turn, they can't do anything about it because all your stuff's phased out. Why isn't this card played more? This card seems ridiculous. Maybe I'm overhyping it and I'm missing something, but no, this seems crazy. And then after that, we got Swiftfoot Boots, gives a quick creature hexproof and haste. It's insanely valuable. The haste is so amazing and so important here. We're not running much haste in the deck because in Dimir it's hard to find good haste. And the other haste equipment you'd be thinking about, Lightning Greaves. The Shroud's bad in case we draw more stuff where we want to enchant or equip, because we're not running many other creatures that we'd be able to pull the Lightning Greaves off of and move on to something else. So we're just running Swifties because hexproof is exactly what we're looking for. Then we have Turn Aside, which counters target spell that targets a permanent you control, and Keep Safe. Does the same thing, but you draw a card. Both these are great. I don't usually like counter spells, but when you're using them to protect your commander, I am okay with them, because there's not much else we can do in this deck with a 7 mana 6/4 commander. We really need to hold it back because it's not giving us any other value besides the 6 power. And then for the rest of the protection category, you've already seen all these cards. Silver Shroud Costume and Wings Boots are evasion and protection, which is a great combo. And then Armor, Shadows, Shore Up, Champion's Helm, and Combat Research are all protection and pump effects. All these cards are great, and running double duty here is so important. So next up is Draw. It does reach the minimum for 10 draw spells that I'm looking for in my decks. I would have liked it to be more so that we can draw into more lands, more ramp, more evasion for eventually when our commander does die. But running the bare minimum 10 is fine here because we have such a critical mass of the other things. We're going to be top decking those quite often. And even when we draw the draw spells, they are recursive. They happen multiple times. So the auras that whenever we deal combat damage to something, we draw a card. they are very useful because of that. And so they're not just one-off draw a bunch of cards, they draw multiple cards over the course of multiple turns, which is very helpful. So to start off, we have Frantic Search, which is draw 2, discard 2, and untap 3 lands. And the reason I like Frantic Search so much is because if one of our lands taps more than 1 mana, it acts like a ritual. We get more mana back than we spend into it, which is super useful. And the draw 2, discard 2, I'm fine with filtering because we have a couple cards, Demonic Embrace, Dragon's Shadow, that want to be thrown in the graveyard so that our commander can get them back out later on, which is super nice. Night's Whisper, Sign in Blood, which is 2 mana, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. It's awesome. I love these cards. The 1 mana and a life to draw per card is actually a great rate, and they help you just get through your deck a little bit faster. They're really cheap so that the cards you find off them you can still cast, which is what you want to be doing. And then finally, Read the Bones. For 1 additional mana you get to scry 2, and scrying 2 is almost like drawing a card, so this kind of reads like draw 3 cards, lose 2 life for 3 mana, which is an amazing rate. Up next, we got Curiosity and Mask of Memory. So Curiosity states whenever enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card, which is insane. If you're running a commander or a different kind of deck that has pingers, this, whenever the enchanted creature deals damage, draw a card, is amazing. There's a famous infinite combo with it, with Niv Mizzet, but in here, it's just a 1 mana draw a card whenever we connect, which is super useful. And then Mask of Memory, same thing. Whenever our commander connects, we get to draw 2 and then discard 1, and the card selection 2 mana on hitting is amazing. And then last up, these are the multiple category cards. Pump, card draw, or Evasion and card draw. They're all great, and like I've said before, the double duty here is so beneficial and so necessary. So for the ramp category, we have a lot of it, and it's necessary because our commander costs 7, and then we have a ton of auras and equipment we want to cast, equipment we want to equip, and then protection we need to hold up. And so it does take a lot of mana to do all that, and because we're in Dimir, we don't have access to great land ramp, but we do have a couple that are worth running just because land ramp is more secure than artifact ramp. And because we're running a bunch of equipment and stuff like that, people are going to want to blow up our artifacts and stuff. So cards that just blow up all artifacts or destroy all non-land permanents, bounce into hand and stuff, having the lands out is going to be a lot more useful than artifacts in those instances. First up are 2 of the strongest ramp spells in the deck. Dark Ritual and Sol Ring. Dark Ritual costs 1 black mana and gives you 3 black mana back, which is an insane card. This card's amazing. They haven't printed a card as good as this ritual ever since. Like, it's probably the best ritual ever because of how early it can come out and how fast it can get you going. And this essentially makes our commander come out 2 turns faster than we would be able to just through like lands alone. So yeah, Dark Ritual really helps there. And then obviously Sol Ring, one of the strongest cards in the history of Magic. It's probably the 2nd strongest card ever printed behind Black Lotus. And yeah, no, Sol Ring, again, an absolutely insane card. And like you saw, Heraldic Banner and Sonic Screwdriver, because they do multiple things, they are so useful. And Heraldic Banner being a pump, Sonic Screwdriver being evasion in addition to them being ramp is amazing. So these are the only creatures in the deck besides our commander, and they're all ramp. Burnished Heart, pay 3 to cast it, and then pay 3 to sack it, and go get 2 basics, put them on the battlefield. Canoptic Wraith is a much worse version of Burnished Heart, where it still costs 3 to play, but you have to attack with it and deal combat damage to a player, but it has unblockable, so that's fine. But then when you pay 3 and sacrifice it, you search your library for up to 2 basic land cards with the same name as a land you control. So it is very limited. It's a very limited version of Burnished Heart, but it still goes and gets 2 basics, which helps you ramp quite well. Canoptic Wraith, worth running even though it is so limited. And then finally, Solemn Simulacrum and Scampering Surveyor. They're both 4 mana, and they go get a basic and put it onto the battlefield. Scampering Surveyor, you can go get a cave if you don't want a basic, but we're not running any caves in this deck, and none of the caves that I saw were worth it or were better than a basic for Scampering Surveyor, because I'd rather just have another untapped land in the deck versus running a cave just for Scampering Surveyor to go get. But yeah, the only downside is it doesn't draw a card when it dies like Solemn Simulacrum, but still get 4 mana, making a chump blocker and getting a basic is still great value. Next up are the mana producing mana rocks. Wayfarer's Bauble does sack to go get a basic, but it is more like a mana rock than the other ones because it is not a creature. But yeah, Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Talisman, Dominance, all can tap for all of our colors we need, but Talisman does deal 1 damage to us if we're tapping it for the blue or the black, so always spend Talisman on colorless or generic pips first before you go to cast it, use it to cast colored mana pips. And then Gilded Lotus, probably one of the strongest ones in the deck, because if we have Sonic Screwdriver out, we can untap Gilded with it, produce a bunch more mana, and it making 3 mana of any one color really helps. We have a lot of cheap spells that have bunch of mana pips, and so it helping cast all those is very helpful. And then lastly, we have the generic mana making mana rocks. Everflowing Chalice, one of my favorite mana rocks because it scales with the game. If you want to pump 6 mana into this, it makes 3. You only want to pump 2, it makes 1. The flexibility there is amazing, and I love this card so much. Prismatic Lens, you can filter mana if you want to, but otherwise it just produces a generic. Mind Stone, if you don't need the mana from it anymore, you can sack it to draw a card, which is honestly great. Like, I've used that more times than I care to actually believed I would have, because the card sometimes you just need to get out of a sticky situation and the mana's not doing anything. And then finally, Thran Dynamo, again, it's a great target for Sonic Screwdriver, and 4 mana producing 3, almost 1 for 1, which is a very, it's as close to the best rate as you can get, because Soul Ring is totally out of bounds. And like I said earlier, we're not running a lot of removal because we don't really need it, because we're going for player removal, but there will be instances where we need to get rid of some key things that are going to stop us from being able to kill our opponents. All this removal deals with creatures, and that's because if people are threatening us with big creatures or something like that, we're going to be able to deal with those. And Feed the Swarm hitting an enchantment could hit a propaganda or something like that if we need to swing at a player who has something out that's enchantment out that's stopping us from attacking them. But yeah, Snap and Unsummon, they're both great. Snap can also bounce our commander, and Unsummon can also bounce our commander back to our hand if we need to protect it. I didn't put them in the protection category because that is a last resort, but they are able to do that. And then Walk the Plank, Infernal Grasp. Infernal Grasp is a unrestricted kill spell. Destroy target creature, you lose 2 life, which is great. And Walk the Plank, unless you're in a pod where someone's playing Merfolk all the time, Walk the Plank will feel like just 2 mana, destroy anything without any restrictions. So you know you've all been waiting for what wipe I'm running, and that wipe happens to be Inundate. So it returns all non-blue creatures to their owner's hands. And the problem with Inundate is because it hits all non-blue creatures, sometimes opponents will have blue creatures out that we're not hitting, which would be unfortunate, but it keeps our commander around, and that's the most important part. We can get rid of a bunch of stuff. It'll kill every token that isn't blue, that is a creature, which is super useful. But yeah, I really like Inundate here. It is a bit expensive at 3 generic and 3 blue. Like 6 mana for just a bounce is pretty bad. But again, it misses our commander, and that's important. And for the lands, we're running some more interesting lands than I thought I was going to be. Because when I was putting the lands together, I was thinking, what kind of tech lands could I kind of put in here that would deal with some niche instances that are really going to shut down the deck? So first up, we got Rogue's Passage. It's unblockable on a land. Shizo's Death Storehouse, also unblockable on a land. And Minas Morgul, Dark Fortress, also unblockable on a land. I love all these lands for that reason. They help us get our commander in for damage if we're missing some other stuff, like an Aqueous Form or something like that. And these just really help with that. Minas Morgul also puts a shadow counter on our commander and turns it into a Wraith, which means that we don't have to keep activating it for the unblockable. We just do it the once, and then if it dies, we can put it back on again, because it creates the shadow counter. It's not like it's moving it or something. So yeah, Minas Morgul is absolutely amazing here. Love this land. I'm going to run it in more decks, especially decks with proliferate and counter moving stuff, because putting shadow counters on stuff, it makes your creatures unable to block stuff without shadow. That's unfortunate, but you can put a shadow counter on target creatures. So we can put on one of our opponent's creatures if we want them to be unable to block too. Minas Morgul is hilarious. And then Encroaching Wastes can destroy target non-basic land. I'm running a bunch of non-basic land destruction lands in this deck. Most of the other ones let the player owning the land go search the library for a land so that you replace the thing. And that's to deal with Maze of Ith or a Glacial Fortress or Glacial Chasm or something else. There is another land, like Thematic Compass flips into a land that stops our opponent's creatures from attack. Like we can stop our opponent's creature attacking. It's just to deal with stuff like that that's really going to be a problem. And then finally, Hall of the Bandit Lord is haste on a land, which is kind of amazing. And then I say it in all of my videos, but Wizards, please put the Battle Bond lands in all of the pre-constructed commander decks. And all the commander products. Like, these should be in, like, commander sets and everything like that, because they're designed for commander. So please put them all in all of those sets. Thank you so much. So I had some difficulty putting the maybes together and figuring out what I wanted to cut for this deck. It wasn't as hard as some other decks, but figuring out what I wanted to cut and what I wanted to keep did give me some difficulty because I wasn't sure how many of each category to run. I am running low on removal and card draw, but I thought, you know what, I'll just stuff a bunch of evasion and pump stuff into the deck and really get a critical mass of that going, because that's really what the deck is going to want to do. And instead of putting in draw spells to find more of that, I'll just put more of that in so we just get it naturally. Maybe I should have cut some of it for some more removal and more draw, but I'm happy with where the deck is right now. Here's an entire category of cards I decided not to run, and there are even more of these if you wanted to go looking. But these are all, if the creature dies, it comes back kind of effects. The reason I went for a different kind of protection card is because if I was running these, auras would fall off, they go to the graveyard, equipment would fall off, and it would just feel kind of bad losing all the auras and stuff. So I felt more like running proactive protection with hexproof, and then spells that'll counter or give indestructible or hexproof to dodge removal on the spot, instead of having this stuff where, again, we would lose all of our auras, which is a feel bad. Some of these do give power bumps, so they would fit the protection and pump category, but at the same time, when they fall off, that would just feel really bad. And lastly, some other stuff I cut. Distortion Strike was probably the 101st card in the deck, being a sorcery for 1 mana that'll give our commander unblockable and +1/+0 twice because of the rebound. It's honestly amazing. It's really good. It's just, it being a non-permanent and it going away, you only get to use it twice. I'd rather have a permanent out or like an equipment out. That way you can use multiple times. Even if commander dies, we can go get a new one. And that's the thing. If we cast Distortion Strike, then our commander dies, it'll just go away on our next upkeep, and that just sucks. And then Whisper Silk Cloak. Again, not running this, same reason I'm not running Lightning Greaves. It is unblockable, it is protection, but the Shroud really does suck if we have some other auras or equipment we want to put on our commander in order to bump the power up to get that 2 or 1 shot commander damage. So what do you think about the deck? I'm pretty happy with it. I'm as happy with it as I can be for a Dimir Voltron deck. It is pretty limited as a strategy. Voltron really wants you to be in different colors than this. Blue is good for unblockable, but you want to be in more in red and white, green. Honestly, like the Naya colors fit more to a Voltron strategy, with red giving you the damage boosting and green giving you like big power trample. It's easy to get through with that, and also just great power boosting abilities. Card draw for having really big creatures, which you want to be doing with Voltron strategies anyways. And white also gives you a bunch of really good, like, all that glitters and effects like that for a Voltron strategy, which is super nice. So Dimir does seem like, black just seems like the worst color for a Voltron strategy, and blue is good because of the unblockable, but it's really hard to get the power up without having multiple cards or some inefficient colorless cards. But yeah, let me know what you think. Would you build a deck like this? Have you ever built a Dimir Voltron deck? Or if you play Voltron, what actual colors would you play? What commanders would you run? I'd love to hear you about that down in the comments. So these are all my socials. Twitter is where I post when these videos go live, and then I'll eventually start making content for TikTok and Reddit, and then Architect and Moxfield are where all these deck lists live. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, get building, splainers. Alright, that is so